Hello everyone, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Amy Kellum. Dr. Amy Kellum is an Associate Research Fellow at the University of London with a background in international public law and Chinese law. For several years, she has worked with Tibetan refugees of Nepal's civil war in refugee settlements in India and Nepal, with survivors of physical torture and political imprisonment. This has evolved into a broader interest in socio-legal issues, and she has recently published research on domestic abuse during the UK's COVID-19 lockdown and has been awarded funding to make a short film on the issue for Being Human Festival 2020. Have I missed anything, Amy? And welcome to our podcast.
I think you've covered it very well, and thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honour. Thank you.
So my first question to you, Dr. Kellum, is what is the definition of domestic abuse and how it differs from domestic violence?
Right. Well, there's been a linguistic shift that has taken place over the past decade or so in government policy guidelines. And that has shifted from domestic violence, which encompassed, in fact, a broad range of offences, not just physical violence. But we now have started to define this as domestic abuse, and that is the title of the forthcoming domestic abuse bill, which is awaiting its second reading at the House of Lords. This reflects a recognised need to move beyond reactive responses to physical assault. On the other hand, I think we should remember that violence is not necessarily just a physical act. In essence, there is actually very little difference. It's a matter of optics. It's a matter of trying to change perceptions to get people to recognise that what we're dealing with, physical acts, extreme physical acts, however it's essential it is to address those. They are just the tip of the iceberg of what domestic abuse actually encompasses and the reality that victims experience.
So within that, does that include sort of psychological abuse, control behaviours and that sort of?
Absolutely. These have been recognised in policy guidelines for some time, initially under the heading of domestic violence, and that included psychological abuse, financial abuse, coercive and controlling behaviour, as well as sexual abuse and physical abuse. The new law, by taking the definition, changing the title to from domestic violence to domestic abuse, I think is trying to reinforce this idea that that we are looking at, in fact, a very wide spectrum of behaviours that victims experience.
Wonderful. And so often victims are blamed for not leaving their abusive situations. Why is this perception problematic, in your opinion?
Yeah, this in fact followed on from, very well from what we have just discussed. And that is that whilst you may consider a domestic abuse victim to be a person that might undergo serious physical harm or injury, this is in fact only the minority of cases. That's not to in any way undermine the significance of those cases, but they're the sort of headline grabbing, clickbait, as it were, cases that we have come to associate with domestic abuse crimes. Research actually shows that coercive control is a better predictor of fatality than physical violence alone. In other words, coercive control begins the process. It is an all-encompassing behavioural pattern with cumulative effects. Not only that, but it spans social spaces. It doesn't, whilst we might consider that domestic violence is a crime that happens in the home, actually it expands beyond that, because coercive control will follow the victim. It will follow them into their workplace. It will follow them into their social spaces outside the home, especially with the advent of technology, phones, messages. In fact, the spaces where a person can escape are minimised. So that's one aspect of it. The victim becomes kind of enmeshed in this world in which they can see no escape, because the abuse may follow them wherever they go. Also, on a more practical level, in terms of violent, extreme violent abuse, there has been a lack of refuge spaces. There's difficulty accessing housing. There's particularly in family situations, there are problems with children. A victim may be forced to choose between their own safety and the safety of their children, or even pets or animals. In the family courts, children can be weaponized. An abuser might threaten access to the child in the family courts. So that's a second reason. And I think that on top of that, I think that there is a matter of perception, a matter of trying to convey the actual experience of abuse to other people in order to seek help, because of the cumulative nature of abuse, many incidents are actually, from a criminal justice point of view, really nothing. They're minor. And the same goes too for the healthcare setting. They might be medically non-significant. So we might be talking about slaps or shoves, or obviously coercive control in terms of kind of threatening behaviour through words, or controlling the access someone has, dictating what they wear, when they sleep. And what you see is that victims will reach out for help multiple times, but that help does not materialise. And whilst things like our current housing crisis and financial and economical things, which if we have time I'd like to return to later, are also factors in why a person can't just walk away. The difficulty of actually getting third-party support is getting that belief, getting someone to see that if they come to the door and they see a woman that is hysterical, in tears, showing great fear, then nothing seems to have really happened. It's just, okay, maybe their partner like gave them a little shove or something, that woman will unless the responder is very much aware of the dynamics of this type of situation, they may well appear as irrational. They may be showing an irrational fear reaction, and I think that wider society has a big role to play in this, in terms of giving people the confidence to share their experience, to find practical ways of recording evidence for what otherwise would be kind of non-crimes, non-medical health issues, you know, but cumulatively over the years build up to something that is highly significant, not just to the individual, but to society and economy.